Most people, when they get into pen testing, immediately gravitate to some form of pen test operating system. And it makes sense. Why? Because there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of things that you have to use as you're going through a pen test process. And it's more than the tools, obviously. You have to know how to use the tools. But invariably, most people don't want to have to install everything from scratch. One of the things I've noticed is that most people will kind of gravitate towards something like Kali Linux. They might use Parrot OS. They might use Black Arch. Like if you are into Arch Linux, you probably gravitate towards that. But for the most part, most people will kind of start using some type of penetration testing operating system that gives them the set of tools that they need to be successful, to kind of kickstart their learning process. And again, it's a personal choice. What you choose is really up to you. You could go ahead and use one of these pre-made operating systems, or you could say, I'm going to roll my own. I'm going to go ahead and install Ubuntu or Debian, and just kind of go ahead and start installing things as you go along. The bottom line is, though, it is a bit of a task to do that because there's so many tools that you can use. So creating something that's very opinionated helps out quite a bit because then you start learning the tools that are important to you. One of the things that I did was I went and installed Kali Linux. Kali is pretty much what I think most people tend to gravitate to, only because it does have such good name recognition, and it's well managed, and it has a breadth of tools. Every major tool that you could imagine is probably in Kali Linux. So I think most people will go down that route. To me, it makes a lot of sense. But as you continue to use these operating systems, the one thing that does stand out, and it's happened to me on some occasions, is as you install additional tools that are not part of the base operating system, that's where you start running into problems. You start running into it because they will break dependencies, things like Impacket, for example, where you might want to install Impacket directly from the Fortran GitHub repo. Sometimes might conflict with the install that Kali did, and that happened to me before. And so I know that all these operating system makers, they do their best to try to avoid the conflicts. They put them into APT to make things a little bit easier to install. But sometimes when you want the latest and greatest, or you want to use, let's say, a dev branch from a tool maker, it becomes a little bit harder. And again, for these tools that aren't the mainstream tools that you just kind of discover and you say, I want to use this is where it becomes a little bit more challenging. There was a project that I discovered a while back, and I kind of tabled it for a little bit, but I thought it was really neat and I wanted to revisit it because the more I get into my career, the more I want a little bit more control over it. And it's a project called Exegol, basically. And so let me go to the website here. And when we look at Exegol, Exegol was created by a group of professional penetration testers. I think they're based out of France, if I'm correct. And one of the things that they've tried to do is use Docker containers to isolate the tools that you use from the actual host OS. I thought that was actually really cool. I thought it was a very novel approach. And so while the website's really cool, the website's not going to show you a lot here on the homepage. I did want to point out that it is exegol.com, exegol.com. It's interesting because it is a reference to some Star Wars theme. I'm not a Star Wars fanatic. I'm sorry. I'm more of Lord of the Rings. But with that said, the GitHub repo is actually called the Porgs, and I do remember the Porgs being these little animals in Star Wars, which yelled out "Rah!" So it's kind of neat to see these references that they're using. But what I do love about Exegol is that it started off as a community project. They were creating containerized versions of tools that you can easily pull down and then drop them into your host OS. And they handled all the networking, all the integration components of it. The tools they have such a really great breadth of tools. And if we go into it, I'll show you real quick what I mean. If you look, like they're in this container, think about the work that they're trying to do. They're trying to create a container that will include tools like Amass, and I know that they have NetExec in here, and here's Azure CLI, there's Bloodhound and Bloodhound CE. So they've taken a lot of steps to try to make sure that the tools that you are dependent on day in and day out, tools that you probably are accustomed to in, let's say, Kali OS or Parrot OS or Black Arch, are available to you within these containers. But again, it's done in a way that isolates it from the host OS so that you don't break dependency chains in the host continues to be stable, and you can scaffold up a container really quick, or tear it down and it's gone. And one of the things that you'll learn as you start going through your pen test career is that a lot of times you're going to want to have isolated and very specific environments for your penetration test. You're going to want to have those dedicated, let's say, container areas for each individual client that you're testing. You want to make sure that you don't kind of mix and match, obviously, because that would be bad. You don't want to mix and match information between two different clients on two different pen tests and then get really odd results. So they've done a very good job of kind of isolating the things, and they provided not only tools but resources that they feel are really, really good for your pen test. So as we go through here, there's sysinternals, there's PS Spy, there's Ps. These are all tools that I use all the time during my pen tests, and they're great for enumeration, but they're trying to make it convenient for you so that you don't have to go and hustle around and pull things out. You know, you might have Ansible scripts that do this for you. Totally understand it. And I'm sure you can leverage those Ansible scripts to kind of build out this whole entire environment for yourself. But they're doing a lot of the legwork ahead of time to try to make life easier for you. So let's do this. What I would love to do in this video is walk through the steps to install Exegol. I do want to say that at one point we're going to pause because the download of the container is fairly large. It is a 42 gig container, so it takes quite a bit of time to get there. So we're going to go through the install steps. They're pretty straightforward. They're easy to do. And then once we got that and we see things are downloading, I'm going to pause the video and then I'll come back because I'm not going to keep you on here for like 15 minutes just watching me go twiddling my thumbs while we're trying to get stuff going. So let's get over there. So I'm going to go into my VMware settings and let's see. So here we have the Exegol website. I wanted to do this really straightforward just from them. And it says start for free. Now, I do want to mention one thing. Let me go back to their website real quick. They do have they were a community program. They have since evolved, and what they wanted to do was kind of support their efforts. And as we know, open source is really hard to support. Most people that create open source software don't get paid for it. So what they're trying to do is continue to offer a community version of Exegol while also building this out into a true commercial endeavor. And I support commercial endeavors. I think if you're able to do it while still giving back, it's great. If you go here, the community edition is still $0. What it means is that you're going to get the full version of the Exegol container. It's like all the tools. You're just not going to get nightly stuff. And you won't have the choice of like very specific versions of it. There's like an Active Directory container. There's one that's for OSINT. There's one for web app. These are containers that are very specific so that you didn't have to download the whole entire full version. You could say, if I'm a web app pen tester, maybe you only want this small set of tools. And so they do offer that, but that's where the pro version is going to come in, and there's going to be more capabilities in there. And of course, if you're a company and you want to use their stuff, this is a great opportunity as well to support them and help them build out their company. So let's get back to installing this. So let's start for free. And that's what, I think most people are going to want to look at. And let's see, I'm going to install this into my Ubuntu VM. And yes, I'm installing a VM. I'm installing a container, a Docker container into a VM. So it's, again, this weird inception thing going on, but it's going to work really nice. I tried it out and it worked really well. So we're going to go to Linux, obviously, and we're going to do bash shell. So I use bash shell here. And the first thing we're going to do is just literally copy this. All right. What do we want to do? We want to paste that in there. Sudo, we're going to do an update, and then we're going to do an install of Git, of Python, and make sure we have pipx so we can install some packages. So we'll go through, and no, I won't tell you my password because let's see, it looks like it didn't work. That should work though. And so we'll go through. It's going to do a very standard update of packages in apt, and then it's going to install those three things that I mentioned again: Git, Python 3, and pipx. It's pretty fast. You see, we're already done. So I'll clear this out. We don't need to see that junk. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have all the paths set up properly so that as we're installing these packages, things don't get borked. So we'll do that. Boom, good to go. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go here, and this just resets the shell to make sure that the path settings are applied properly. So let's clear that out. So now we're all set. let's go down here. The next thing we need to do is make sure we have Docker. Now, I don't have Docker installed here. Most Ubuntu desktops aren't going to have Docker installed. So let's go ahead and grab it. We're going to go and do a curl command. It'll go to docker.com and then just initiate the execute the shell command. So we'll go there. It's going to go ahead and go over to Docker. It's going to pull it down. And this is, again, another very quick install. This doesn't take long, but again, the Docker system allows you to create containers and run containers. And that's what we are going to be using for Exegol. Exegol is container-based, so we want to make sure that we can grab the Docker system and be able to use it. And sure enough, we are already done. This is perfect. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we're going to have to install Exegol. Now, Exegol is pretty straightforward, so we'll go here, clear this out, boom, and we're going to go to pipx. It's just a standard Python wrapper. Exegol is a Python wrapper that basically streamlines a lot of the requests that go into Docker. So if we go here and we do this, notice that it starts creating packages, pulling down shared libraries, and then it installs Exegol, which is cool. Now, the next step is really important because in order to run Exegol properly, we have to run it as sudo. Now, and the reason is because we don't want to run Docker as like a rootless user, because then it becomes a very big security vulnerability. In fact, right before this, there was a whole message about that when you install Docker. So when you go through the Docker install, it's going to say, hey, do you want to run this as like a rootless user or a root level user? You can do it if you want, but that's up to you. I would prefer to go and run it as sudo. And the great thing is they've taken care of that. So by doing this, now that we've got Exegol installed, we just run this right here. And all it's doing is creating an alias for Exegol that basically runs it as sudo and drops it into bash aliases. So we run that, all set, beautiful, we're squared away. And then the next thing we're going to do is, this is where it starts getting a little bit more time consuming. All right, so we'll go here, clear this out. Now that we've done that, and I believe if I go here, Exegol, yep, good. If I go Exegol, boom, run that, we're going to start getting a bunch of commands. These are all the commands that you need in order to run Exegol. So you're going to have Exegol start, which helps you create and spin up a container. You can stop the container. You can restart it if you want to. You can install a brand new image. So remember, I mentioned that there were different types of images. So you're going to have the full, you're going to have the nightly, you're going to have Active Directory, web app pentesting, OSINT. There's a bunch of them. The one that is available to users in as a free version is going to be the full. It's not updated on a nightly basis. That means that, yeah, you could run into some quirks here and there. The great thing is that Discord's available to you, and the folks there, they do a really good job of providing support. Now they're in a different time zone, just remember that. So if you make a support request, it may take some time to get some feedback, but they are generally very responsive. So this is Exegol, and if we do Exegol info now, Exegol info, we'll see that basically it's saying, hey, we haven't, first let's accept the EULA. Yeah, we got to accept the EULA. And do you want to activate a subscription? I don't have one. If you had a pro or you have an enterprise, you'll activate a subscription here. I'm going to say no. This is the community version. And then here, I confirm that I'm not trying to rip off the developers who put their blood, sweat, and tears into Exegol, and that I would absolutely support the project if I were using it professionally. I'm not that kind of person. All right, Shutdown. Shutdown's one of the developers. Yeah. This is the guilt trip here. Like, basically, look, if you're going to use this professionally, pay a few dollars to these folks. They're doing a lot of good work. So I confirm that I'm not trying to use it. All right. And so it's going to go ahead and basically create the wrappers. And these are the ones that I was telling you about. These are the available images. So free is the one that's currently available. You have light, which is a much smaller version. Notice that it's 14.81 gigs. And you have the nightly. The nightly is fairly large as well. And then you have Active Directory. The full is the one, pretty much the free and the full seem to be very similar. The web, and then the OSINT. The one thing to remember is that if you do install this on a VM, you're going to need about 200 gigs of space available. This VM is about 150, and I was able to install it with no problems. But just the reason is because when you install a new container and you update, you're going to have to pull down that container, and let it get turned down, and then it's going to replace that container. So that's their update mechanism. So you essentially would have two containers sitting out there, and it might take up too much space, and then it's going to time out. So try to give 200 gigs if you can. If you can't, it is what it is. You do your best, but just wanted to make sure that you all knew this is how it works. So these are the containers that are available. The one that we'll be working with today is the free one because we're using the community version. It is very good, by the way. The free version has a lot of tools, so don't think because it's free, you're not getting some good stuff. So we go here, we'll go Exegol, and the next step should be install. This is where it starts getting a little long. So I just want you to know that once we start the download process, I am going to pause it. So that way you're all not waiting for me. Now there's Exegol resources. We'll talk a little bit more about resources. I actually briefly mentioned it on the website that I showed them to you. These are additional resources like SharpHound and Peas and these additional resources that make life easier for you, including even profiles for pre-made applications like Firefox and Burp Suite. So I'll show it to you once we get to that point, but let's go ahead and install the resources. Yes, I want to install them. And now we're going to start downloading this. This is not going to take too long. What takes long though is the download of the actual Exegol container images. So this is just simply cloning a repo, it brings it down. It shouldn't take, I don't know, maybe a few more seconds. But again, the interesting part of this is that it will download these resources that they've vetted. They've looked it over. These are resources that they feel pretty good about. And you can see them there. There's Mimi Penguin, Winnie Num, Sharp Collection. Really good resources that you want to have as you're doing a pen test. Why? Because invariably you're going to need to use them for things like, I don't know, enumerating Active Directory certificate services, or maybe you're going to use Ps for enumerating a Linux machine that you sit on. If you've done Hack the Box, you know that you're going to use this a lot. You're taught almost from the beginning when you take any pen testing course that Ps is the tool to use for enumeration. Now, as you get more into your career, that's where you start thinking a little bit more about things like how do you avoid EDR. So just running Ps arbitrarily probably wouldn't be a good idea. But during a pen test, it's less of a concern because you are not purposely working to avoid EDR as much as you are trying to identify these gaps that you have. When you're doing a red team assessment, that's where you have to be much more cautious about what you run. And so, but having these tools are great, and understanding how to avoid EDR is well beyond the scope of this specific video. Now, this is where it starts getting time consuming. So I want you to know that we are going to pause at some point. We're going to select an image. We're going to do the free one. All right. And it starts downloading. You can see it here. It's going there. And by the way, I remember the first time I read this right here where it said, NW, what is that? And then I had to, oh, it's Shutdown. Shutdown again is one of the core developers from the project. So this is his repo. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to pause this video right now. I want to make sure that you all have a chance to kind of go get a cup of coffee or something like that. And then I will be back once this is done and we'll continue with the video. All right. Thanks for your patience. All right. We're back. Like I told you, I wanted to kind of spare you guys from having to wait approximately about 15 to 20 minutes for this to download. But as you can see right now, we're back at the screen. We've gone ahead and gone through the steps of installing the container image. The container image has been brought down. It was about 42 gigs, which is why it took so long. I didn't want you all waiting 20 minutes for this to come down and get all set up. So I'm glad you didn't have to worry about that. So the next step now would be actually to start a container. And that's going to be cool, but there is one thing that I want to do, and there is this auto completion feature. And so Kali does this really nice. Kali will actually do a lot of the autocomplete capabilities for you. And so the folks at Exegol wanted to do the same thing. So it makes it easy for you to be able to type in a command and it auto completes. So that's all set up in there. We'll go here, and this is actually a Python script called rcomplete that will help with that. So I'll do this in here. Boom, drop that in there. And then the last thing is I'll register this. And now that gives me autocomplete capabilities. All right, so we're set. Let's clear this out. We've gone, let's recap a little bit. We've gone through, we've We've installed the Exegol wrapper, again, a Python wrapper. We've downloaded the free, right here, this one, the free image from Exegol, because these other ones, they're part of the Pro or Enterprise subscription service. Again, they're trying to balance it out. They're trying to give you a community version that you can use so that you can work with, you can learn from. You can use it for things like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me or other pen test ranges. And then they're also wanting to kind of sustain the project because open source is it's very expensive basically. And again, the project is based on containers, so it's interesting because they use containers to kind of spin things up. And even though it took 20 minutes to pull down the main Exegol container, the one thing is that once you spin up an image, it's much quicker. Kind of reminds me of Ludus. And if you haven't seen my Ludus video, go ahead if you want to create very complex cyber ranges, and especially in the cloud. But they do a very similar thing where they have base images, and then from there you want to create new virtual machines from that, and it allows you to kind of use that as a template to spin one up. And so these folks are doing something very similar, but more from a desktop pen test environment perspective. So we'll clear this out here. And let's go ahead and spin up our very first container. So, and then you know what I'm going to do is I want to expand this out a little bit. Let me just open this up because now that we've done this, we can just go back to the terminal and have a much bigger terminal. All right, so we'll do Exegol start. All right, and when you do that, it's going to say, all right, what container do you want to use? All right, I want to create a container. Now, when it says container name, this could be let's say your the company that you're going to be doing a pen test against. It could be a hack the box box name that you're kind of want to keep track of. So let's say I said I'll do Forest. Forest is one that is very famous on Hack the Box. I love that. So I'll just do Forest, right? And then it's going to say, what image do you want to use? If you had multiple images, you could select which image is appropriate for that individual pen test you're doing right now. And then from there, I'll use free because it's the only one I have. And here's the cool thing. It's going to give you a summary. It's going to say, all right, what do you want to use? You want to create forests. You're going to use the free image. It's going to tell you that it's up to date, which is cool. It's going to tell you all the different things that are available to you. So like, here's credentials. I'll tell you about that in just a second. Remote desktop, this is very cool. I will show you that in a second. All right, but just be patient with me. You have console GUI, so there is X11 integration so that you do have capabilities to spin up tools like Burp Suite and Firefox. You'll see that in a second. The network is host. That means that the host network adapters and the adapters for the Docker containers, they are basically in sync. So that way, when you do reverse shells, they just funnel all the way through just by specifying the host adapter name, which is really neat. Time zone, you can sync time zones. This will tell you where to find the Exegol resources, the ones that I mentioned earlier. These are the specific files like PSSpy and SharpHound. It'll tell you where to find it on the Docker container. These are your resources. Yes, you can add your own resources, and I'll show you how to do that in a second as well. If you are a professional pen tester and you're on a pen test, you're going to want to log. And so they provide you with the capability to do logging. It logs it out, and they use something called Ask Enigma to go ahead and replay that. And you want to keep these logs because you want to know what commands you ran and at what time you ran it in case there's any need to deconflict something that's going on. If you ran something and God forbid it broke a server, you want to know what you ran. But let's say you didn't run something and the customer says, hey, I saw this activity going on in my server, was that you? You can go back and say, no, that wasn't me. And then you have to perhaps call the IR department, the incident response department, to come and check things out. And if you want to run, let's say, something in the Docker container at a privilege level, you can do that. And then here is the directory for the workspace. So the containers are all based on a concept of a workspace. That's where you store all your main files. And then the cool thing is that workspace is a shared folder with the host. So you can transfer files from the host to the container and back. And then we'll show that in a second. So if all that container information looks good, then you can say yes, and it's going to spin up the container, and you should see that it spins it up and it uses ZHS, which is nice, and you're done. And so let's bring this up a little bit. Here's the container. Notice that it wasn't 20 minutes. It literally was like 10 seconds to spin up a container for you. And so once you're in here, you have a container that is completely separate from the host. All right. So I'll do 2 tabs. This is my host right here. All right. And notice all the stuff in here. And here is the container. All right. Notice that I'm in a workspace folder. This is the main folder that is shared between the host and the container, and where you would, again, try to store most of the information that's applicable for your individual pen test. All right, so if I go here, right, and I say something like, I don't know, I think it's T, no, touch, let's do touch, foo.txt, right? Now you'll see that there's a file here called foo.txt. If I go back to my host, there is a directory called Exegol right here. See that? That is the link between your container and your host. So if I go cd.exegol and I go to that folder, you're going to see a lot of stuff in here. All right. You're going to see a config.yaml file. You're going to see Exegol resources, some of the resources that I talked to you about. You're going to see resources that you could specify. And actually, you can even, in there, you can actually add applications that can be installed from apt. Or your specific individual package manager, let's say like Pacman. I think it's Pacman's for Arch, I believe. In this case, we go to workspaces and I go here. If I can type today, you're going to see there is one name called Forest. Now, do you remember that we named our container Forest? So what it does is it actually names these workspaces based on the way that you named your container. So if I go to Forest now, right, what do I find? Foo.txt. If I go in here and I say nano, and this is in my host again, nano, foo.txt, and I say, hi there. And then I go back to my container and I do cat foo.txt. See how they're linked up? This is pretty neat because now you can easily transfer files back and forth to either complement the work that you're doing, or sometimes you might want to take stuff off of the container and save it off to it. And you're going to want to save stuff off, actually. So you're going to want to take that and save it into some other medium, let's say an external drive or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of integration points that help makes your life easier. So now, we had talked about the resources, and the resources are really important. Why? Because they're meant to save you time and effort instead of having to go and scour the internet trying to find where all these files are living. So what if you went here and you said cd opt resources, right? And here you have a ton of stuff at your disposal. Notice you have web shells, you have Windows directory, you have a Linux directory, a Mac directory, right? You have a lot of different things. So if I go to Linux, you're going to see a lot of resources. Sorry, caps lock is on. That you probably are very familiar with. There's RustScan, there's PSPy, Mimi Penguin, LinPeas, Legolo, okay, for lateral movement. Notice that they're not trying to provide you with every tool that's there. It's just not, it wouldn't be feasible. You'd have an image that was, a container image that was massive, but they're trying to provide you with a lot of the things that are commonly used. If we go to Windows, you're going to have a lot. You're going to have a lot of the potatoes. All right, you're going to have WinEnum, WinPeas. There's RustScan, Sharp Collection. You have a lot of the tools, again, that for Windows enumeration and privilege escalation, you're going to want to leverage as you go along. So again, they're trying to make life easier for you, trying to make it so that you don't have to struggle with what you're doing. Let's see what else we have here. All right, so we go here. This is the main resources file. So here, if I go to my resources, this is where you would store your own individual files. Notice they have a bin and they have a setup directory. In the bin, this is actually part of your path. So if I go here, all right, you're going to see that here opt my resources bin is in there. And the reason is because if you have a binary file that you want to store in there, you can actually put that in your host and you can go here. I believe it's right here, if I'm correct. Here, and my resources, and there's the bin folder right there. So you can drop binary files in there, and now that becomes available to any container that you create going forward. Those will be available so that the you don't have to constantly be adding them into every container that you do. They also have this setup folder here, which is kind of neat. And let me show you why it's neat. All right, so they have this right here, and yes, they have Bloodhound and Firefox and all that, but this right here is awesome. Um, so one of the things that they do really well is, I'll go to Workspace, is they provide you with X11 applications for specific things. So like if I wanted to run Burp Suite, right, I can run Burp Suite from here, and this is not installed on my uh, let me close this. Sorry, it's loading all the typical stuff. This is not installed on my host. This is available to me from within Exegol. So they are providing this, and they have integration with X11 so that you can continue to use tools like Burp or tools like Firefox. Even Firefox comes up here, so I can go here like Firefox. And by the way, notice that the auto-completion is available. And this is part of their preset histories, which is really nice. And so I can bring up Firefox, for example, and even though I have Firefox here, look at this one. This is interesting. If I go here, I'll go there, and I believe here, and this should tell me the about Firefox. And notice that it's using a much older version of Firefox. This is extended support release 128. But if I go here to this one, this was the version that I had brought up earlier. This is 144. So basically, they've isolated their own version of Firefox along with so many other tools. And then they provide you with the capability to install your own set of tools to make it easy to use them within the container. So again, this is available to you to use within the context of the container. But the reason that they also have it as a setup is because they add other things that are time savers, like Wappalizer. If you are doing application security, you're probably using Wappalizer at some point. Here's Cookie Editor, and I believe they even use they have Foxy Proxy in here. So if I go here, and I think it's more tools, and then where's my extensions? Where's my extensions? Come on. And notice I do this on the fly. I always riff this stuff. Where's add-ons? God, okay. You know why? I'm going to go here. This is going to make my life easier. All right, add-ons and themes. Yeah, so extensions. So they have Cookie Editor, Foxy Proxy. I thought they would have that. User Agent Switcher, Wappalizer. These are all tools that if you're doing application security testing, you're going to be using these tools. So that's kind of neat. I like that. I like the fact that they've taken those steps to integrate these capabilities as time savers and to integrate directly into the container itself. But here's the thing: what if you wanted to use something else, like I don't know, Sublime? Like Sublime's not part of this. They don't have a built-in. Well, they use something called, I think it's Trillium. Trillium's a note taker. But let's say you wanted to use something like a real IDE. Well, you can go here, and remember we mentioned that there's this load user setup, right? In that one, you can do a couple of things. One is that this will run shell scripts for you. So that way, if you wanted to create, let's say, a set type of directory structure on the fly all the time, you can do that. That's one part of it. For Sublime, you're going to want to go into the APT folder, and there's 3 files in there. Keys.list, that's the GPG keys that are necessary for signing specific applications and validating them. You're going to have the packages list. That's the name of the actual package that you want to install. And you have the sources list, where you're pulling them from. So if we go to nano keys, right? And I'll do this right now. So I was really excited about doing this because I thought this was such a novel feature, right? So I'll go here and let me find it because I can't remember all this off the top of my head. I'm just sorry, it's not gonna happen for me. But I'll copy this and I'll go here, right? So we're gonna pull it down from Sublime. We're gonna get their GPG key, and then we're gonna go to sources because we need to figure out where do we grab this from. And I'll go to sources, and this should be sources here. And drop it right in there. So we are pulling down from sublimetext.com, and we want to get it from the stable branch, right? And the last thing we need to do is packages. And open that, and then we're going to do here. Now, once I got that, all right, the next thing I want to do is, now we know that, I also want to do something a little different, okay? I like to create a set directory structure across every container that I'm using. It's just, or every company that I use is going to have pretty much the same folder structure it's just the way I organize things, right? And so that's where this load user setup comes in. So if I go nano load, and I'll go here, and I'm going to just grab this because all right, and I'm going to make sure that once I run this, that first it's going to go into the current workspace directory for this container. Then I want to create these specific directories. I want to create a directory called loop, exploits, screenshots, users, hashes, and scans. And you can do it whichever way you want. I kind of do that. This is my organizational structure. It's worked for me, but I'm always willing to listen to other people and their feedback. So I'll do that. Now we've done that. I'll get out of here. And then I'm gonna destroy this particular container. So Exegol remove. Wait, let me get out of here because I'm still in the container. And oh, I have running jobs. Interesting. Oh, you know what? I bet you I have burp running. Let me see. Yeah, burp was running. That's what it was. Okay. So now that I'm in here, I can go Exegol remove. I'm pretty sure it's Exegol remove. Is it? Yeah, let me see. Yep, there we go. Okay, so there's forest. There's my container. Notice it says select the container by its name. Remember I created the forest container, right? So I'm going to get rid of that. And it says, do you want to permanently remove it? Yes, I want to get rid of that. I know there's stuff in there. I want to get rid of that too. Get rid of that. Once it's done, boom. That container no longer is available. If I go Exegol info, we can see that we have no containers. We only have basically that free image, that image that we're going to build from. So now what I want to do is say Exegol and start. And remember that the two things that we did here was we want Sublime to be installed, and we want it to be installed in the container that we're working on. And then we also added a directory structure to the workspace that's being created. So if I go here back to cd.exegol workspaces, you'll see that I have no workspace folders. They're not there anymore. Forest is now gone because I removed it, right? So now if I go Exegol, start, and what's another one what was an active? Active was another one on Hack the Box. Okay, so I'll call it active, right? Exegol start active. This time it's going to take a little bit longer, and the reason is because not only does it have to create the container image, it actually has to install Sublime for you. And so that means it has to go out, it has to do a sudo app update, it has to do a sudo app install of Sublime. It's going to take just a little bit longer, but not too long. It's like, I don't know, 30 seconds in total time. All right. And then it's also creating the directory structure. So if I go here and I run through that, right, it's going to say which image, just like before. Let's do that. Notice it's taking a little bit longer this time. It's not just going through and arbitrarily doing it. So taking its time. And why? Because it's going out and pulling down Sublime. It's grabbing it from the Sublime repository. And pretty much it's done now. You can see it right here. Boom. All right. So now if the first thing I want to show you is I have the directories that I mentioned. There's exploits, hashes, loots, scans, screenshots, and users. And so if I go here and I'm back in my host and I go cd.exegol and workspaces, we're going to see there's active. And then if I go active, there are my directories. So now the load user setup allows you to run this shell script that can do specific things upon your individual container running. But here's the cool thing. Let's say I wanted to update a file. Before we use before we use nano, right, to create foo, what if I said I want to use subble now? Subble is the prefix or the short name for Sublime, and there we have Sublime. Sublime is now installed within the context of this container. It's available to us. If I go here, though, if I say, where is Sublime here on my host, Sublime's not installed. It's not there. So this is running within the context of the container. And so that is pretty neat. The fact that you can add these applications that are within the context of the container, and that means that you can add individual capabilities to support your pen testing needs. So this is really cool. They did a really good job on that. The other thing I wanted to show was we had talked about, let me exit out of here real quick. We had talked about this right here. You remember this part right here, this right here, where it says root and remote desktop. And so this was actually pretty neat because I can do this, right? Exegol start active. But could you imagine if we had a full-blown desktop within a desktop that's part of a virtual machine. Oh, all right, my mind's blown here. Totally Inception. So hopefully this is going to work. But if I go here, whack, whack, desktop, right? Now we got to remember these creds here. It's going to be important. So it's going to be root, and it's going to be this, right? We're going to run this, and let's see what happens now. Oh shoot, didn't work. Okay, hold on a second. Let me close this out. Let me try something real quick. Let's get rid of active. This is where the learning comes in. So we'll remove that. I think you have to create it first. So yeah, again, this is me. I work on the fly. I don't, so at least you know that. Okay, so we're gonna do Exegol start at desktop, right? All right, and here. All right, cool. There we go. Okay, so now the container is gonna start up, but now you see where it says remote desktop. Yeah. So let's grab these creds here, and this is so neat, right? I'll show you what I mean by this. So we'll do that. Let this finish up because again, it's installing Sublime. Once it gets going, almost ready. Come on. And here it comes. Come on. There. Okay, great. Now we're going to go ahead and start this up, right? I'll open the hyperlink. And basically what it does is it provides you with a VNC connection to the container. All right, so this is my host. Notice it's 144. So this is my host browser. And so if I go here, root, and I take the creds that I just got from the Exegol info on that container, look what's happened. Boom. I have access to my container in a full-blown desktop. This is just it blows my mind that you're capable of doing this. But here's Firefox, here's Terminator. Notice that Terminator ends up in workspace. There are the directories that I created. So yeah, so I could either work in a terminal-based environment, and I can spin up tmux in here if I wanted to, and then that way I can have a multiplexer type of scenario. Or if you're more used to a desktop environment, you have it there. Exegol provides this. This is really neat. So there's a lot more to talk about, and I've been talking now for almost 40 minutes. So there's just so much in here that's available. I think what would be great is for everybody to kind of take a step and look at Exegol, see what it provides to you, see if it's something that's really cool, because there are so many other features. Even things like NetExec, like these pre-made histories, all right? They call it, I think they call it preset history, right? Things that help you fill in the information and learn what you have to provide in order for a specific command to run. So there's NetExec. If I did SMB client, all right, notice it fills it for you. See right here? Yeah, so that way, that's one of the things that's always cumbersome. What are these commands? How do I remember all these commands? So a lot of the helpers are meant just to streamline your understanding of how to use the tools, what information to pass to it. They're helpers to make life easier. And there's a host of other things that I wish I can go into. Even something like, I didn't know about this. This is really cool. I think Shellerator. Yeah, Shellerator is really neat. All right, so I can go here, Shellerator. I didn't know this existed. This is really cool. So I can go here and say, all right, what's the interface I want to use? All right, I want to use the host interface, right? And what's the port that I want to use? I can specify 444, which is 4444, which is the one that everybody uses. But here, I'll use 443, right? And then what type of shell do I want to create? I'm going to create a bash shell. All right. Well, look at what Shellerator does. So Exegol, thank you for showing me Shellerator, because you've just saved my life on some stuff. This is really neat. But notice that it creates the shell script for you so that you can use it forward. So again, helper functions that make your life easier. So this is Exegol. Again, your choice of a penetration testing operating system, it's a personal choice. You got to feel comfortable with what you're using. You have to feel comfortable with your environment. But one of the things you want to do is make sure that you're protecting the spaces that you're using. So in this case, if I do Exegol info, right? And notice that we have one container down here. It's called active, but if I wanted to create another one, right? Exegol start, and I wanted to do forest. I'll go back to forest and create a new one. All right, free. And it's going to create it for me. It's going to take its time because installing Sublime in there. Remember, it has to install Sublime because I added it in there as an option. Notice this time though, I didn't specify slash desktop, so this is off. Okay, if I did, then it would come up. All right. Oh, it failed. So something happened. I'm not worried about that. But if I go here, Exegol info, and I look to see how many containers I have running, it should tell me I have forest and I have active. So now I have two different containers available to me, and think of these as two different companies that I was doing pen test on, or two different boxes that I'm working on Hack the Box or Try Hack Me or some other service. And they're isolated and they're available not only within the context of the container, but they're also the data that you store, the credentials, loot that you pull down, information about the boxes. Now it's also available on the host. So if you wanted to offload that to other media, you can do that. I love the fact that it's isolated. I love the fact that it protects the host from installation of arbitrary tools that might cause instability. That's one of the big selling points of this. So again, check it out. It's a really neat project, something that I checked out a while back, and they've definitely made really big strides in terms of improving the experience. I think you're going to really like it. It might actually shape the way that you think about how you're going to use these tools going forward. So take some time on that, and also look, if you want to help me out, if you want to just subscribe down there, subscribe to my channel. I'd like to continue to teach here and provide more useful information. So if you did find this useful, subscribe to my channel and like it, because I think it'll help me with building more visibility for the channel and helping more people learn about cybersecurity and technology in general. So thanks again for joining in. If you want to see Exegol, let me pull up the web page here, and you can go to Exegol, exegol.com. Let me go to let me go here. Bear with me. There we go. And you go here. There's Exegol right there. exegol.com, and hopefully you'll give it a shot. It's such an easy project to install. Just takes a little bit of time, that 20 minutes. So make sure you have 20 minutes, go grab coffee, grab lunch, whatever you want to do, and come back. So thanks again for joining in. Thanks for watching the video, and look forward to the next one.